You are listening to Blog Talk Radio and LombardiAv.com, where for the next 30 minutes we will be discussing everything Green Bay Packers. Hello, everybody. I'm Davey Miller, your host, and welcome to the show. Joining me on the sports panel today is Ray Rivard. Ray is co-producer of this show and is the site editor at LombardiAv.com. Ray has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the Green Bay Packers, and we are certainly glad he is with us today to share his insights on Sunday's win against the Detroit Lions. Also with us today on the panel is Big Dan Terzinski. Dan's a junior up at UWGB, and he's studying journalism. He's also interning at LombardiAv.com, and he, too, is very knowledgeable when it comes to everything Green Bay Packers, and he will be sharing his insights on the Packers today as well. So, welcome, fellas, and let's get right down to it. Ray, what do you think's going on with the Packers' sputtering red zone offense, and what do we got to do, or what does Coach Mike McCarthy have to do to start scoring touchdowns instead of kicking field goals?
Well, good question, Davey. I think everybody's kind of scratching their heads the last 3 weeks about the Packers' red zone offense. It seems like when they get down with very little room to operate, down inside the 10, they just, if I had the answer, I'd be walking the sidelines in place of Mike McCarthy. I just really, you see teams go through stretches like this where they move the ball up and down the field and they get inside the 20-yard line, 10-yard line, and they just seem to implode. The running game goes.
As the field gets shorter, things start. As the field gets shorter, things certainly start happening a lot faster down there. Dan Terzinski,
right.
What are your thoughts on the red zone troubles?
I think it's directly on McCarthy. The play calling in the red zone for me has been borderline atrocious. I mean, McCarthy hasn't been the best play caller since his time in Green Bay. Some of the decisions he makes when he gets down into crunch time, obviously the field shrinks, so you can't be sending out routes that take time to develop, especially with the offensive line having its protection issues, although they play very well against Detroit. The play calling, especially inside the 10-yard line, I mean, you're throwing the ball all three downs inside the 10-yard line. I'd like to see a little bit more out of the I formation, maybe a single back. I think he utilizes the shotgun way too much throughout the course of the game. Somewhere to 70-80% they're running shotgun, and that's just not going to cut it in the NFL. You got to be able to find balance, especially on the goal line. I think the play calling takes him right out of the field position.
Yeah, exactly. And go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, I just want to insert something here. We've heard some talk about Aaron Rodgers being a little frustrated when they get into those situations and not being able, from what I understand, not being able to necessarily change the call at the line of scrimmage because of the control that Mike McCarthy has put over him in those kinds of situations. I'm just wondering if, does McCarthy need to give Rodgers, I mean, guy's been in the league 8 years, he's a Super Bowl champion. Don't you give him a little more leeway in changing the call and controlling things on the field, like back in the old days when the quarterbacks controlled the game?
Well, I think that the Packers are in transition. They've been a high-powered passing game over the last number of years, and now all of a sudden, with emphasis in the off-season and early season success running the football, particularly last Sunday when a healthy Eddie Lacy came as advertised and started running right at the teeth of Sue and Nick Fairley, wearing them down in the fourth quarter and still getting 3, 4, 5 yards of crack in between the tackles. Eddie Lacy on 23 carries for 99 yards showed that he is a bruising-type running back, and the Packers now have options, and they're kind of figuring it out how to put it all together. At least they're winning right now, at least 2-2 moving forward. That was a big win on Sunday. But I think offensively it is going to get worked out. They're figuring out how to mesh everything together on both sides. And I think the red zone come November is going to be humming just fine. Dan Trzynski, let me ask you this. Aside from Calvin Johnson not being in the game last Sunday against the Packers, what do you take away from that football game and the Packers win? What did Sunday's game tell you? Anything specifically about the 2013 version of the Green Bay Packers?
Yeah, I thought offensively they didn't play well again. Obviously, it was a very good blessing to have Calvin Johnson out because aside from Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and Drew Brees, Calvin Johnson is like one of the most unreplaceable players on any NFL roster. So they got a big break not having to cover him all game. But they struggled. Again, they had to kick 5 field goals offensively. One good thing that I saw was the offensive line played very well against what was supposed to be the stout Detroit Lions defensive line. They held their own, and in fact, they had the upper hand for the majority of the game, I would say. Evan Dietrich Smith finally had his best game of the season, and it was a good time to have it, holding up against Fairley and Ndamukong Suh. You hit on it. Eddie Lacy was very good. He would have went over 100 yards if I think Jared Boykin in the fourth quarter there, he had a 20-yard run or something that got called back. So he would have been well over 100 yards. So that was good to see him bounce back. It's nice to see the rookies help out. Other than that, Aaron Rodgers was pretty sharp, except for in the red zone, which I wouldn't translate to his fault. So other than that, I thought the defense played pretty well. They're going to have some problems at linebacker now with Robert Francois out this season with a torn Achilles, and Brad Jones could possibly miss time with the re-aggravated hamstring. So it'll be interesting to see who steps up there, looking at Jamari Lattimore, possibly a free agent signing, maybe Sam Barrington. They're going to have a hole there at the second inside linebacker. But other than that, I thought it was a solid win. Still a lot of things to improve on, but you can build on wins like this.
Well, Terrell Manning's still out there, too. He just got cut by San Diego if they needed to fill a linebacker spot. Of course, they activated James, is it Nixon or Dixon, from the practice squad. And what's that?
No, Nixon, you're correct.
Nixon.
Okay. Yeah, and I liked him in preseason. Good cover. I like the comparison to Sam Shields. He's probably the second fastest guy on the team to Sam Shields. Smaller guy, but he certainly can jump, and he's got some cockiness to him. So that's a good activation in my mind. But as you mentioned, what are you going to do at linebacker? You were 5 deep at the middle linebacker spot. Now you're down to Sam Barrington being the backup inside linebacker. Dan, we know now that Clay Matthews, and I'm going to ask both Dan and Ray this question, so Ray, put your thinking cap on. With Clay Matthews not being in the lineup for the short term, what is Green Bay going to do? What do you think their best option is in filling that spot? Put Neal over there, put Perry over there, go to a 4-3 and put one of those two I just mentioned on the defensive front at times. What do you see happening with the injuries at linebacker?
Well, I'm not so sure it's going to be a short-term deal. He just had surgery this morning, so it's looking to be more like a 6 to 8 week project, which is half the season gone for him. So it looks like it's going to be something that the Packers are going to have to deal with for an extended period of time. Mike Neal has played very well this season, but it's been in a limited role, sort of quarter of the snaps, of the defensive snaps he's playing. So it's going to be different to see if he'll be able to play, 3/4 of your snaps. Nick Perry's coming off the best game of his NFL career. He played very well Sunday, and it was very nice to see that. These are the type of performances that he's going to have to build on to become the number 1 pick that we took on him. He's going to need to become worthy of that, and he played very well Sunday. I was very excited to see that. We've been waiting for that to come. Another guy that's going to have to step up is rookie Andy Malumba. Inside, they're going to have to generate a pass rush. You have to get more from Dayton Jones. B.J. Raji's kind of been invisible. Mike Daniels has been a very good player so far for the Packers this year. Maybe his role will increase as he's only seen about a quarter of the snaps along with Mike Neal. It's going to have to be a group effort. Obviously, we know they've struggled in the past when they've had Clay Matthews out of the lineup. I think it's a different defensive line. They're a lot deeper with the addition of Johnny Jolly and Dayton Jones and Mike Neal's new role. They're just going to have to replace him. It's going to be the next man up attitude, and I think they can do it.
So do I, and for those very same reasons you just said. Ray, you got anything to add to that? What's your thoughts on the loss of Clay Matthews for maybe up to 2 months? And who's going to fill that role, or collectively, who's going to fill that role?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Dan just said. Football's an 11-man game. It's a team sport. They're going to have to start. Dom Capers is going to have to put his thinking cap on and come up with some creative schemes to, bring this team, this defensive unit together as a unit, so that and that's the way they played Sunday. They really swarmed to the ball. A lot of guys, a lot of hats on the ball runner, on the receiver, on the quarterback. So you never like to see your $60 million man sitting on the sidelines, but they've got some capable young players who I'm sure are pretty hungry to get out there on the field. And sometimes this is the time for those guys to shine, and sometimes you get even a better effort from the guys coming off the bench. It's definitely a setback. I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think it's the kind of situation where if Aaron Rodgers went down, we'd probably be a little more concerned about the team. But I think they'll rally around this. We've been here before. We've seen guys go down, and the next guy has stepped up, So I think this team is deep enough, and the coaches are smart enough to put together a game plan that's going to, at least mitigate the loss of Matthews.
When you consider the depth that the Packers have this season as opposed to last year, the three linebackers coming in after Matthews would have been Eric Walden, Desmond Moses, and Frank Zombo. This year, it's Mike Neal, Nick Perry, Andy Mulumba. I think that's three definite upgrades on all three positions for 2013. So as you say, Ray, I don't think all's lost. Certainly you're going to miss a Clay Matthews, and you can't replace him with just one guy, but I like our trio of linebackers that I just named there. The thing is now we can't lose any more. You got Nate Palmer waiting in the wings, and you got Barrington, first man in on the inside. After that, you don't really have anybody. I think they should go back out and get Terrell Manning. I liked him. He was cocky. Maybe he thought he was better than he really was, but I thought he was a good football player. Getting back to you, Ray, now you and I talked about this for the last couple of days. Now, and it's even more so, it becomes even more pronounced now that Matt Flynn has been released by the Oakland Raiders. But regarding Mike McCarthy and his teaching young quarterbacks expertise, with the fact that the point I brought up in an article we were talking about was 6 days before the season started this year, we had one quarterback on the roster. That was scary, and nobody coming in. B.J. Coleman, they did not like for the practice squad. They don't like Matt Flynn now after his release, according to reports. And Graham Harrell was released with no quarterback pupils doing anything of any amount of success across the league that Mike McCarthy had trained, and the fact that we have nobody really to speak of in the cupboards or on the practice squad that's going to do anything. So has Mike McCarthy's reputation as teaching young quarterbacks taken a hit because of the lack of success his students have had, save for one Aaron Rodgers?
I think that it has taken a hit, and really I think the reason is because he's a head coach. He's got so many more responsibilities now as a head coach, whereas, when he was an assistant and a quarterback's coach, he could focus on, that position. But now that he's a head coach, I think he's, purposefully stepped away from, the day-to-day, this is your footwork, this is your timing, working with quarterbacks types of things and teaching. So, I think, you could probably point more directly at the quarterback coaches who have been in Green Bay over the last 6-7 years as more of an issue than Mike McCarthy himself. I would venture to guess that if Mike McCarthy were the quarterback's coach, maybe we would have seen more from Graham Harrell or more from Bohm and those guys. I don't know. Maybe he's just not fully invested in the quarterback position. He's more in tune with the big picture and the team as a whole.
And he no longer has Joe Philbin there by his side to help teach those quarterbacks as well, and he's doing a really good job down in Miami trying to build that team from the ground floor. I was disappointed with B.J. Coleman, 6'3", 235 pounds, a laser for an arm, great attitude. I thought McCarthy could take that raw foundation and make that into something special. Was it the student? I can't see him not being willing. B.J. Coleman, every time you heard him speak, he was just shaking in his boots. He was so happy to be there. So B.J. Coleman was a disappointment to me as far as his development under one Mike McCarthy. Dan Trzynski, you got any thoughts on that?
Well, just on the Coleman front, I mean, there was a reason why he was a 7th-round draft choice. I think to think that he would have been anything special in the NFL would be a stretch. Every guy comes in, especially late round choices, come in with a great attitude. They're happy to get drafted and whatnot. But Coleman was never going to be a backup, let alone a starter in the NFL anywhere. They have really dropped the ball, though, in the backup quarterback position. Like you guys said, Aaron Rodgers has been the only sure thing for them, and he really fell into our laps. There was no scouting report on him or anything. We just had to take him by default, sort of like Eddie Lacy this year. From Matt Flynn to Brian Braum to B.J. Coleman, even the free agents they brought in, Vince Young and now Seneca Wallace, who is still a question mark. They really, it's been frustrating to see that they can't back up anything for Aaron Rodgers. If he goes down, we go down. We literally have no shot at any success without Aaron Rodgers. So to see them put all their eggs in one basket, so to speak, with the contract for Aaron Rodgers and with no backup quarterback, it's really frustrating to see some of the roster moves that they've made at the quarterback position.
I'll tell you what, I'm thinking just from this conversation right here, although we have other needs, particularly at safety going into next year's draft, they may have to take a quarterback in a 1st or 2nd round and groom him for 3 years, and during that 3 years have coverage in case Aaron Rodgers goes down. You can't keep swinging and trying to hit with 7th-round picks, as you noticed, and undrafted free agents. You're going to have to draft one that's talented already when you get him. And to do that, you got to use a high draft pick. So I think this, and I'm just thinking out loud here. We'll all do our draft predictions in April. But looking at it right now, Green Bay may have to consider drafting a quarterback at least in the first 3 rounds. Ray, it's about time for our Packer predictions, and then if we have time, well, let's just go ahead and do the NFC North outlook at this point, and then we'll get on to our favorite segment, our Packer predictions, which I'll start off with Dan Terzinski doing the Packer predictions. But first off, Ray, what are your thoughts about the NFC North? What's going on?
Well, I think everybody is showing who they are. Detroit and Chicago, they showed some things early on. I think that they're settling into the places where they should be, which is, they'll probably finish the season, in my estimation, right around 500, maybe 9-7. One of them may get to 10 wins, depending on their schedule and injuries and everything else. But I think, the Packers, with or without Matthews, are head and shoulders above those two teams. I just have that.
Mm-hmm.
They just have more depth. They have better players at the skill positions. Their coaching is, in my estimation, things could be a lot worse. Things could be a lot worse in Green Bay. So as far as the NFC North goes, I think teams are just starting to settle into where we thought they would be at the beginning of the season, and I think it's going to play out probably pretty close to where everybody thinks it should play out.
Mm-hmm. Dan, what's your thoughts on the NFC North?
I think the Josh Freeman signing for the Vikings could potentially be a season saver for them. They haven't played well early. Yep. They barely held on to beat the Steelers. Otherwise, they could be staring an 0-4 record. The Packers and Vikings play, I believe, in 2 or 3 weeks. So at that point, Freeman may be ready to go in the offense, depending on how well Castle plays on the road. I think Christian Ponder's Minnesota career is all but done. He's been bad for them this season. Even though he took him to the playoffs last season, but he was unable to play against us, of course, in the wild card game. Josh Freeman, I think, got a bad rap by the Schiano era down in Tampa Bay. I think he's a very good young quarterback. I agree with everything Mike McCarthy was saying on them. He's got a strong arm. He's a good kid. He's got some weapons to play with in Minnesota, so that could potentially be a turnaround for them. I think I said this last week. I knew Detroit wasn't going to be for real. They hadn't played anybody tough. In the moment that they played somebody tough and had a little adversity without Calvin Johnson, they go back to the old lines and get beat. I said the same thing about the Chicago Bears. The last 2 weeks they've played 2 tough teams, and they've gotten beat handily by both teams. So I think that it's still the Packers' division to win or lose. They still have 5 division games to go yet, so it's really in the Packers' court, even though they're currently down in the standings. I don't expect it to be that way at the end of the season. It's the Packers' division to lose again.
Yeah, currently they're 8th in the playoff standings in the NFC behind San Francisco, and I can't remember who else, but they're a half a game out, but because San Francisco's ahead of them in the head-to-head, it would be a game out. So as we stand right now, the Packers are a game out of the playoffs, and they control their own destiny. So I called that 1 and 2 start a speed bump. I still believe that. I think it's going to be a dogfight, though, this season as everybody. Here's an interesting point, and we'll let Dan after this give your Packer prediction. But the Green Bay Packers offense, as I mentioned earlier, is in transition. And Aaron Rodgers said that they are not playing him any differently yet, even though we've had success in the running game this season. And I think the reason for that is because everybody knows Green Bay's just doing the run so Aaron Rodgers can line them up. So they're not going to let Aaron Rodgers line them up. Going against football strategy, common football strategy. They're still not going to honor the run as much because of Aaron Rodgers under center. And because that, it's a cat and mouse game, and we're in that transition where, teams should be playing up more, but they're not. And so Aaron Rodgers is, not going as deep because they are keeping a two-shell back. So it's just kind of an interesting chess game that by November, I'm thinking, if we continue consistently running the ball hard like we have up to this point, they will eventually going to have to start honoring the run. But it's just interesting that they're doing it later than common football strategy says. And I think they're doing it later because everybody knows Green Bay still wants to pass it. So they're staying defensively, honoring the pass. Okay, Big T, go ahead and give us your Packers score for this Sunday at Baltimore and give us your reasons why.
Well, I think this is another Packers victory. This one's not going to be an easy one, though. Baltimore is a very tough place to play at. They have Ray Rice at running back, one of the best dual-threat kind of runners, receiving and rushing the ball that we see in the NFL from week to week. I think Joe Cool Flacco has obviously been struggling early in the season as compared to his brilliant playoffs last season. He's been a turnover machine through 5 picks against Buffalo 2 weeks ago. They just barely snuck out a win against the Dolphins this past weekend. They haven't been playing that great a ball. Everybody said that their defense was going to be improved after losing guys like Ed Reed and Ray Lewis. I was actually one of those, so I'd have to admit that I was wrong there. They still obviously.
I wanted the Packers to draft Courtney Upshaw.
Yeah, I did too.
Go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry.
Their defense hasn't been where they wanted to, obviously, but that could all change, if they shut down a good Packers offense. I think the Packers are just going to get the ball rolling here. If they don't turn the ball over, they'll be fine. They have to start generating turnovers like they did in 2011, but I think the Packers could win this one by 10+. I'll go 30-20 Packers.
38-20, you say?
30-20.
Oh, 30-20. Okay, excellent. Ray, you've got us for about a minute and a half. Why don't you tell us your thoughts on what's going to happen this Sunday?
Well, I agree with Dan that I think this is the week when the Packers offense should turn a corner. I feel that they do have the running game really established well. The offensive line is playing well. So I think again the team will rush for over 100 yards. I think that Randall Cobb will probably show some more in this game than he did against Detroit. Detroit kind of had him covered pretty well, but Baltimore, they're the world champs, and Baltimore is a tough place to play. The Packers play well on the road. I just feel that Rodgers will probably have more of a Rodgers-like game this week than he did last week. And even Rodgers, he said we're a team in transition, and that they are still a passing team. So they're going to light it up. So I feel that the Packers, they're going to score some touchdowns. I think the defense will continue to play well even without Matthews. So I
need a score, Dan. I need a score, Ray.
Yeah. The score: Packers 32, Baltimore 17.
32-17. Okay, thank you. I'm going to go 20-24 the Packers, thinking that it's going to be a hard-fought slugfest once again. The offensive line and defensive line for Green Bay has been playing well. And I would like to thank everybody for listening. Be sure to tell your friends that they can catch this podcast 24/7 by clicking on LombardiAv.com. For Ray Rivard and Dan Trzynski, I'm Davey Miller. Have a good day, everybody, and thank you for listening.